over 50 million users rely on Anaconda for curating Python and R packages used in data scientists, machine learning, and scientific computing. My name is Paul Nashawaty, and I'm the practice lead for the app dev practice at theCUBE Research. I'm joined by Peter from Anaconda. Peter, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on. You want to introduce yourself and your company?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Peter Wang. I'm the co-founder and the chief AI officer for Anaconda. We're probably best known for providing a collection of Python packages and tools and having a package manager that makes it really nice and convenient to install some of the more difficult to install packages in the Python ecosystem. But we also have a number of enterprise collaborations, and we have enterprise software for businesses to help them manage their enterprise usage of Python, to help them do data science, do AI and ML deployments better, faster. So it's just been a really interesting journey. We've been at the center of the ecosystem, building Python data science movements and really getting all of that stuff going. We maintain a tremendous amount of the open source tools as well ourselves.
Well, Peter, I mean, it's no question that you're busy. I mean, Python continues to dominate the data science and machine learning and AI space, and the tools that support the ecosystem is becoming incredibly vital for this kind of community. So when we see this, Anaconda, the reason I thought it would be great for us to have this dialogue is because it really does stand out as the foundational platform, and it's used by 50 million users that rely on managing over 7,500 curated packages, right? So there's a lot going on with Anaconda. There's a lot going on with Python, and it's really as AI starts to kind of expand and grow, it's just going to continue to grow from here, right? And I think that's what really matters more now than ever. So Peter, let's just jump right in. When we think about the thoughts around the users that are using the platform, we said there's a lot there. 50 million users. What does this mean about scaling and the role of Python's ecosystem for data scientists and machine learning?
Well, we really unleashed a wave, I think, and there's we have a lot of users, but there's even more out there who use Python for doing data science and AI and ML that are not necessarily using our platform or using our tools. But we did get all that going, and our fundamental premise for a lot of that was that there are a lot of people in the world who needed to do more interesting compute than just a SQL query or just what they were able to get through graphical point and click sort of tools. And that was our thesis, at least when we started the company, and we were proven, I think, dramatically correct, that you have many people who are not software engineers, who are not software developers, they don't have a degree in computer science, but they do want to use some kind of programming tools to express their ideas. And that was really, really true for the data science, if you want to call it that, certainly data engineering, a lot of things around data, right? Back in 2012, 13 timeframe, a lot of people want to do these kinds of things. And now we're seeing, similarly, people want to do a lot of stuff with AI, and you don't have to write a big complex amount of Python to do some of these AI things. But if you go and you look at GitHub repos or whatever for new kinds of models or new things people are building around AI, a lot of that is going to be Python because it's just a nice and easy to use language. It has all the bits you need to get your work done. And so that, relative, I guess, coming back to your question, I think the thesis that we had about essentially advanced computing being something that was ripe for democratization, I think that thesis was proven quite correct 10 years ago. And now these AI systems are, of course, very advanced computing, but under the hood, they're doing a lot of the same kinds of math, right? So the same kinds of tools can now be relevant and I think are in high demand by a much, much vastly larger audience of people. So from our perspective, yes, tens of millions of users is great, but there's billions of people in the world who I want to make sure all of them have equal access and have the ability to use AI tools to make their lives better.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, what we're seeing in our research from the app dev perspective is we're seeing that the creation of applications is just exploding, right? Especially with AI, it's exploding dramatically. I mean, we're seeing, at edge locations alone, we're seeing AI workloads growing from 500 to 1,000 different production AI workloads at the edge over the next 2 years. So just a lot of development is occurring. This also means that the professional developer is no longer the only person that's creating the applications. This moves out to the citizen developer, that moves out to the lines of businesses and various people that just need to get their jobs done, their daily jobs done. So a lot of that has to be taken into consideration as well, Peter, I think. And Peter, when I think about this, there's a lot of complexities when it comes to 7,500 plus curated packages, right? And when we think about the scale of that, how does Anaconda address the complexity and security challenges managing, a lot of these big Python environments and enterprise settings?
It is definitely a complex task. And to be clear, the 7,500 is not all that's available, right? We give access to, hundreds of thousands of other additional packages that are in the open source ecosystem. And when users bring those in, those can't, sometimes I guess they blow up, but we want to make sure that they blow up as little as possible. And those are pieces of source code that are completely outside of our control. And so our job, and is certainly, I think, an underappreciated sort of task, how complex it is. But many of these projects are maintained by teams of people that don't really check in with each other. And we have to make sure these things all work together. Again, like as you said, in an embedded environment or an enterprise environment. And what we realize in talking to a lot of enterprise customers is that historically, when they think about managing compute environments, or when IT says, we have this platform ready for internal usage now, there's a tremendous high bar that they set for that stuff. Not just what comes in and is it ready to use, but also the question of long-term maintenance and who's going to support this. And if an application goes to production, what is their story for how long that application runs? All of those kinds of things are really, really difficult when you have an open platform, when you're using open source technologies. And the unique thing about the Python language, it's the most popular language, or one of the most popular languages in the world. So it may seem odd to say this, but it's really actually quite unique in that it is a volunteer-run language and language community. So it's not like you can, like Java or C++, these have really, really big companies supporting them. Python is still mostly a volunteer-run effort. We as Anaconda are probably one of the standout, actual enterprise vendors for this language and for all the tooling that goes around it. And so we see this. So we go to talk to customers, and they are now basically faced with managing and onboarding this giant open source ecosystem. And it'd be one thing if it was just for data scientists doing data analysis stuff, but this is obviously the ground plane, the substrate for how AI applications roll out. So everyone is rapidly having to figure out what is our actual long-term Python software development lifecycle and our Python management strategy. But not just that, but now everyone in the line of business, as you say, all of these other regular people, citizen developers, are going to come in and start deploying Python code. Obviously, I would love for them to partner with Anaconda as an enterprise, partner on these things. But even with our help, there's still a lot of work they have to do themselves, right, to really get stood up on this stuff.
No, of course. With the polyglot languages that are out there, all the development languages that are out there, we find in our research, and I want to kind of touch on the point that you made, that Python is consistently ranked as among the top programming languages, rightfully so, because it is kind of the fundamental baseline for a lot of applications, and it's easy to use. It has a way for, you don't have to be a diehard dedicated developer in order to build this. Although you still need to learn and come up to speed. So to your point here, I think that there's a lot that you have to kind of think about when it comes to organizations, people watching this podcast here. They need to understand or think about, if you're using different languages in order to achieve your goals, right? And you're trying to deliver against business analytics, or you're trying to build AI applications, or you're trying to make sure you have compliance and security controls in place. All that needs to be taken into consideration. And sure, you can build it and roll it your own, and you can do it your own. And as long as you have a strong bench to support you, that's awesome, right? But Peter, when I think of Anaconda's support, when you think about Python and its dominance in the data science and AI space, there's a lot here about organizations. I think maybe you can touch on a little bit here about some organizations that may want to try to do it themselves, but then use Anaconda as a way to kind of help augment their strategy, their support strategy. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting, actually, if we look back a little before the AI confounder, and it was just data science, machine learning was starting to really take over as a lot of significant compute workloads that IT organizations were starting to be faced with. In that time, I think the first inclination for many people is to look for, what can we buy? What's off the shelf? What's available? And then when they go and buy a really big sort of, polished, wrapped thing, when they go and they buy that, they implement it, and then they talk to their practitioners, the practitioners still prefer to use these open source tools. They prefer sort of just the simplicity of it. It's what they know. They can bolt things onto it pretty easily. There's all of this kind of stuff. And so when we went to market, we have actually multiple offerings. We had ones that were like the bigger sort of wrapped, polished things. And we also had sort of more assemble it yourself kind of pieces. And what we found was that people actually would go one way and they'll gravitate back towards actually doing more of a DIY kind of approach on this stuff, right? Because if you decompose what is actually needed, the kinds of workloads that data scientists are doing, they can range from exploratory to production. Oftentimes people don't want their data scientists necessarily being the ones productionizing a piece of machine learning. So that then turns into talking to IT and having ML ops infrastructure. And so as the landscape evolved, the role of these open source technologies, tools, components, and the role of Anaconda in supporting all of that, that's shifted a little bit, right? So now we're, in many cases, we are a sort of a first stop where a lot of the open source stuff comes in, and we are a sort of a central clearinghouse where people across many different lines of business or across different kinds of personas, job functions, they can get access to the open source tools they know and love, but IT has a place to actually have visibility into where are these technologies being used internally, which kinds of clusters, which kinds of environments have appropriate access to what kinds of things. All of those kinds of basic, I would say table stakes for bringing in open source into an organization. We play a very strong role there. And that's to some extent why we're embedded in things like Snowflake. We have just announced a really exciting partnership with Databricks so that people who use Databricks and also still have a governed open source Python environment and all their line of business practitioners get the tools that they're familiar with. So there's all these kinds of things that we're doing there to just make it easier for enterprises to give their end users what they want. Now with AI, it's a whole different game, right? Because now you have LLMs generating code, and that's a whole different kinds of vulnerability surface and governance surface that you have to worry about.
You're spot on. Actually, that's where I really wanted to pivot the conversation to at this point is, when we think about, AI generating its own code. And, I guess one thing I will say is congratulations on the partnerships, because that's really a really strong area that's growing. Of course, the data is the lifeline of the application. So of course it has to be, partnering with Snowflake and Databricks is really, really great investment there. But let's talk about the security and trust for a minute, right? We have these new initiatives that are coming out, right? New things that are happening, right? We have executive orders that are already in place about talking about supply chain and SBOMs and such. We have, the EU CRA that's coming out that has to be implemented by December 2027. So that's coming up fast. So given the rise of software supply chain attacks, right? And when we think about Anaconda's package curation and dependency management, how does this enhance Python security and trust?
Yeah, a lot of good stuff right there to talk about. These open source ecosystems historically are very much, I think they assumed a certain level of collaborative and shared values in the internet. And it wasn't until, I would say the last 3, 4, 5 years when those of us who are in these volunteer communities realize that we are not just a target for attack, but we are being used as a vector to attack our users, right? And that is not good. And that's not what any of this is about. So you see folks like at NPM, or the JavaScript package library system, PyPI, the Python package index. A lot of these communities and the volunteers who run these things, they are taking this very seriously, that they're understanding just the role of these open communities, that openness is something we want to certainly continue, but at the same time, that's an open door for attack, and we can't have that. So we're trying to upgrade the security of those kinds of systems. Meanwhile, Anaconda, we can run a little bit even ahead of that because we have our own sort of smaller community managed, but then also our corporate managed package repositories and indices where we can be much more proactive about getting ahead of some of those kinds of things. But all of that is still just on the one part of it, which is the software supply chain piece. And that does answer some of the questions and needs that are posed in the European Cyber Resilience Act that you mentioned, and obviously here in the U.S., NIST has these standards they've come out with. The idea of a software bill of materials. All of these are very, very good things to do because we are relying on these pieces of software to do really important things across every aspect of life, whether it's civic infrastructure, whether it's air traffic control, whether it's modeling next generation drugs, chemicals, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that rides on open source software. So it's very important that as a community we up-level our thinking, up-level our competencies in this regard. But for LLMs and AI, that's a whole nother ballgame of additional sets of things you have to do. And unfortunately, this is maybe where we get in a little bit of like hot water, is I think that if you're going to be using LLMs for doing serious kinds of things, there has got to be a similar bar of transparency and of accountability around the data that goes into the LLMs. And this is somewhat of a controversial sort of point of view, I think, because a lot of the frontier labs and whatnot that are releasing these models, they keep them closed. They certainly, even for the open weight models, they don't talk about the data sets that went into training them. Because there's an unfortunate truth, which is that a lot of scraped and possibly copyright violating, sort of stuff was happening in that data collection process, right? So that's why people want to keep it opaque. And I think it's not good for us to have to accept that essentially as just a de facto fact of life. I think we should demand a similar kind of transparency around those things at the model side. And so I'm definitely pushing on some of those things myself. And I think there's many other allies pushing on those things as well in the ecosystem.
Oh yeah, we're also seeing from the current administration in the U.S. here is looking to do some more regulations and controls around AI as well. So there's a lot of things that are kind of going in place. I think, of course, this is an evolution. This is going to evolve and change and grow. Peter, we had a lot to talk about here in a short period of time. What would you recommend to the audience here watching? Like, where can they go to get started, and what would you recommend?
Well, so there are, the great news about AI and all the LLM stuff is that there have been a lot of great teaching materials out there released for free. So I always, for people who want to learn how to start coding with LLMs or how to understand what is in an LLM, there's some fantastic YouTube videos. Andre Karpathy has some good stuff. Obviously, Andrew Ng has wonderful educational materials. And then there's really good explainers for LLMs that sort of visualize what they're doing. All that stuff is available for free on YouTube, and people should actively be seeking those out and learning. Now, once you're actually getting started to code on these things, obviously I recommend people downloading Anaconda and using that as the way that they get their Python, their notebooks, do all these kinds of things. We have cloud service. People want to use remote GPUs and whatnot. If you're an enterprise user or an enterprise customer, we have an AI platform that is really quite open, and it's evolving to have some really cool capabilities. So you can manage not just your software supply chain, but also your models and curate which models you actually want to be consuming internally at a business. So those are things that are in our AI platform, and would highly recommend someone who's interested in this to reach out to us to find out more about it.
Peter, great insights, great options for the audience here to review and look and become educated and understand. I want to thank you for your time today. This has been really, really great having you on the show. I also want to thank the audience here who tuned in. We really appreciate you being part of the AppDev community. That wraps up this episode for today, and we'll be back next Wednesday for another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talents shaping the future of application development. Whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social. If you have any other thoughts, questions, or just want to connect, you can always reach me at pauln@siliconangle.com. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.